My name's Asher, Asher Gammon.
So Asher, are you born in England or Africa or the Caribbean?
I'm born in Hull, in England, in East Yorkshire.
So if someone asks you what's your DNA, because it's becoming very fascinating now that everybody wants to know who they are, people want to know their family tree. So with your makeup, what will you say you are?
Well, it's a bit, last year I did a DNA test. I paid for it online. I found out that it basically gave me my DNA results based on where they were in the world 1,000 years ago. So I was about 50% from West Africa and then 50% from Europe. 15% was from Ireland, actually, and 21% from Scandinavia, which I had no idea about whatsoever. That was of the European side. So 1,000 years ago I was half African and half European, and I guess in the past 1,000 years we've had transatlantic slavery, where my ancestors would have been took to the Caribbean, because I always grew up thinking my father was from Barbados, which he is, and obviously my own ancestors are from West Africa. So, yeah. Although, if people ask me where I'm from, my initial response, I always say that I'm from Hull. I've grown up here and I've participated in the culture here.
So, do you like to be classed as mixed heritage?
Yeah.
In terms of identity?
Yeah, it's important. Yeah, in terms of my identity, it's definitely important to be for that to be distinguished. But sometimes I'm trying to say that sometimes I don't do that for myself. Sometimes I do just say that I'm from Hull. But it's better. But yeah, I think it's righteous or better to say that I'm not just from Hull and that I do have a mixed heritage background.
Okay, if you find yourself in London, which is the capital, they ask you, who are you? What will you respond?
In London, it's a lot. I guess in London, it's there's a lot more people from the Caribbean since the 1960s. So I guess in London, I'd be more likely to tell them that my dad was from Barbados. I guess they're more used to hearing things like that, and it's more regular for people to describe their identity like that. In Hull, as far as I'm aware, the statistics were that the black and ethnic minority population was 2% growing up, and now in the past 10 years it's gone up to around 10%. So there's been a massive increase in my life. And a lot of those people which have come in the past 10 years have come from Africa, from refugee backgrounds, which is quite different from where my ancestors would have come from, which they'd have been economic migrants from the Caribbean. So therefore, to call myself half Bayesian from Barbados and half European, that's kind of allowed me to distinguish my identity from people who have come from refugee backgrounds more recently in Hull.
So in terms of your identity, so what's your African makeup and what's your Caribbean makeup?
Okay, so although I'm half Bayesian, that's people from Barbados, when I did the DNA test, it turns out that I was largely from Nigeria and Ghana, and even there was some DNA from East Africa as well, which is quite unusual, and I can't really explain it. There are a lot of tribes which moved across Africa in the past 1,000 years. So a lot of the people from Barbados were taken from Nigeria as well, so I guess that explains that.
So what about your European heritage, your British European heritage? So is it coming from your mother or your father?
From my mum, yeah, my mother, yeah.
English from Hull or?
Yeah, she's from London, and one of my grandparents is Irish, and the other one is English. Yeah.
So what do you think in terms of, because you've traveled a lot around Britain and you have been to other countries, which I'm very aware of, comparing here, because the ethnic minority is not as strong as compared to Liverpool, which is one of the oldest black communities and one of the oldest mixed heritage communities in Britain, probably even in Europe. So in terms of Hull, how did you think the challenges of being mixed heritage? Is there any challenges?
Okay, yeah, at school, I was growing up at school, and it's almost like I had my identity decided for me by my peers, by the other pupils. They'd tell me that I was black, which is really strange because then I went in 2014. I went to Ghana to volunteer with VSR, or a branch of volunteer overseas. And there I was considered white. They didn't really see me as black, although they would ask if I had some Ghanaian blood. But the name Asha, which is actually a Hebrew name, it's from Israel and it means happiness, is also in Ghana. It's a girl's name as well, so that was another confusion. And some people in Ghana, in rural Ghana, had seen mixed race people, but very few. And they were like celebrities there, just for the fact that it was mixed race, because it was almost, people were excited to see it was something different. And then in this country at school and stuff, I guess it was a similar thing. It's like either or, whichever place I'm in, I'm almost kind of separated or feel a bit compartmentalised, which isn't always the nicest feeling, but it's something which you live with, and it's something which is part of me, so that's what it is.
So did you feel you were accepted in school, even though of your identity being a mixed heritage? Because I've met someone who said he had a mixed heritage daughter in the 70s, and she was even asked to leave the community she was living in, Skipton. She ended up in Hull, which is a good news for Hull. Someone left Skipton because they said, no chance you can have a brown baby around here in the 70s. So you better go somewhere else and have your brown baby. So it was really challenging for mixed heritage people in the 70s. From what I've heard from the other people that I've interviewed. So in your own generation, I think it's much easier.
Okay, I think racism's transformed. It's different to how it was in the 70s, where it was a lot more aggressive and a lot more violent and in your face. But growing up now, being from a mixed heritage background, I do think it can affect job opportunities. I do think it can affect how the authorities and police may see you, or how you may be seen in a court of law. I think there's a lot to be said if you look at statistics about stop and search rates for mixed race and black people in all over England. So there is still some racism that exists, and then there's another kind of the subconscious racistness. When people talk to me, I often find that. I used to have dreadlocks, which I don't anymore, but people would always say, chill out, yeah man, like, are you cool? And I don't know if they talk to their white friends like that, or if it's just how they approach me, because they think that's somehow a language which I relate to, maybe. So there is still prejudice in there, but it's not as violent, and it's not as an aggressive prejudice that it used to be, where people are having to leave their homes or being told to live somewhere else. But I think it's still there, and definitely with jobs it's been difficult. And sometimes it's positive discrimination, and then there's discrimination which comes from your own people who kind of like decide what it is to be black or mixed race and tell you should, or who design your identity for you, that you'd listen to this music or dress in this way or speak in this way, which isn't necessarily true. People should have their own identity.
So you think you're a stereotype in another form? They try to big you up because you're mixed heritage, you carry dreadlocks, so therefore you fit into the Bob Marley and all that.
And it's not just from white people; it's from black people and other people who are of mixed heritage. Stereotypes come in all directions, and sometimes you reinforce them yourself through your behaviour. They're strange things, stereotypes. Yeah.
So what's the challenges with the Africans? Because even though Africans, black, those who were born in Africa and came to this country, because they have different background and heritage, and sometimes you want to identify yourself black, and you also have the right to celebrate both white and black in you. So how do you manage those type of situations?
Okay, so I guess sometimes the communities in Hull are a bit segregated, and I often find myself like in the places where I do work, in bars and stuff like that, and with photography and kind of the arts world like that, they're often quite white dominated. I'm like surrounded by white people, and then a lot of the time I've done a lot of like grassroots artwork and stuff like that, and worked with young creative people, who I've been surrounded by black people, and in both places I guess it's a very different environment and people behave very differently. But then by even saying this, I don't want to reinforce stereotypes about people. Yeah, I guess you just got to treat people as individuals and try and see past the colour of their skin, and try and just be yourself to everyone and not change the way that you behave to other people depending on the colour of their skin.
So what will you advise someone with mixed heritage in terms of celebrating what they are? Because someone with mixed heritage in the community I used to live, sometimes they used to say it's mixed blessing. You're blessed with European and also African, so it's classed as mixed blessing in the community I grew up with in Kono, which is the Diamond District of Sierra Leone, and in that community, Sakwitown, where I live, I'm very proud of my Sakwitown heritage. And we used to say people of mixed heritage are mixed blessings. So what do you like to celebrate? Will you just like to celebrate the black in you, the white, or both?
I think it's important to celebrate both. But sometimes it's difficult to be proud of when what it would have literally been like one of my ancestors would have enslaved another one of my ancestors, to put it into crude terms, so to celebrate both histories. But I don't like to say that there's this like black history and white history. I like to kind of think of them more unified, just like a human history. Obviously there's different cultures and traditions which belong to different races, so yeah, in terms of celebrating them, there isn't much opportunity to celebrate that, as you put it, mixed blessing, being mixed race rather than just one or the other. There's like lots of opportunities to celebrate being black and lots of opportunities to celebrate being white. I'm not sure how they both come together, other than just being happy in who I am every day. So it might not be some event at a community centre or something which just celebrates mixed identity, but I can celebrate it in smaller ways and just enjoy it.
The next stage of this project, we are looking at talking to the Heritage Lottery to compare the mixed heritage journey in Liverpool, which is the oldest black community in Britain, compared to a new mixed heritage community in Hull. Will you like to take part in those type of projects?
Yeah, of course I would.
And then we'll visit Liverpool and interview the people there about their journeys in the 70s, 60s. Here, the journey, I think, is just started probably 10 years ago. So will you like to be in that?
Yeah, I'd love to be involved.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you.